Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Nikki, thank
Hello,
you.
I'm Nikki.
Welcome.
From Milton Keynes in England. Had my daughter Gracie. She was diagnosed with, eventually diagnosed with Sydenham's career back in June 2021. But my goodness, did I have to fight for it? What a struggle. Yeah. Even my brother-in-law, he's a doctor, and he's never seen Sydenham's career before and didn't even know what was going on with Gracie herself. I admitted Gracie to Milton Keynes General Hospital on the 11th of June 2021 because I just witnessed something that I never want to go through again. She just literally overnight just started forming some sort of tic. I thought she was getting some form of Tourette's. Leg kept moving out and her arm just flicking out. To begin with, as a mother, I thought maybe she is putting it on. She's just been a bit of a class clown. But deep down, I knew something else was happening. So I took her to Milton Keynes. They just looked at her, and one consultant actually said to me, "Is your daughter play acting?" Then I was sent back. Then I was sent back home. Just said if her condition gets worse, literally I was back in less than 24 hours later because she was deteriorating before my eyes. Yeah, she was.
And it can be so terrifying, can't it, for a parent? I know we had a group of 24 children, and there was brain hemorrhages, there was tumors, there was all sorts of really scary things being said as they were going through this process of trying to find the answer and trying to find the right consultant, I suppose, in the hospital who could recognise. We were very, very fortunate. We had cardiologists, neurologists, paediatricians who all did recognise the symptoms. So we were quite fortunate, I think, in Glasgow.
Yeah. I think that's the thing with Milton Keynes. Despite my experience with them, they had no idea what was going on with Grace. And it took 2 weeks of literally going into hospital, being discharged, going back into hospital, to the point where when Gracie lost her vision, I knew I had to become a stronger mother and not just be fobbed off. I had to say, keep us in here and observe Grace. And they did, but they were still unaware. They put Gracie on a course of antibiotics because Gracie started getting an ear infection. So they put her on that, and when they got into her system, she perked up. So then we were dismissed again and sent home. As soon as the antibiotics got out of her system, that's when she hit the worst. To the point where we was admitted straight back into MK General, put into the corner of a ward, given Calpol, and just left. And it was only when Gracie, after about 2 weeks of being in and out of hospital, she had a massive seizure overnight, and it was horrific, absolutely horrific. And I became this mother that I never wanted to become. And I lost it with all of the doctors, nurses. And I said, if you don't help me and my daughter, then I've got to discharge myself, because what you're doing is nothing. I said, I may as well just feed a Calpol at home. I was going to discharge. Then a lovely nurse came over and spoke to me and said, we just don't know what's going on with Grace. And I said, but I just need help. You've got to help us, help my daughter. She's 9. I don't know what to do as a mum. And then we was admitted to the following day to John Radcliffe's in Oxford, where I was seen by every consultant, neurologist, everybody. And that's when she was finally diagnosed with Sydenham's career. Yeah, so it was a blessing and
a relief to get that diagnosis, because then the symptoms make sense. But also by getting that diagnosis, it opens up the door to getting the physio or the OT and the people involved, speech and language, who can address the physical symptoms that you're seeing that can be so scary. And I think on the Facebook page, lots of people share videos, and it's really interesting to see. But some of them are really quite scary to see, because it's the unusual movements. It's a really scary time. But I think that nurse was really good in just being honest. And I think as professionals, as patients, as parents, that's all we want, is someone to be honest and say, look, I don't have the answers, but I'll help you find them.
And that's all you want to hear. You just want,
Mhm.
you know, I'd rather somebody would have said to me, one of the consultants at Milton Keynes General, to go, do you know what, Miss Savin?
We
Hands
don't
up,
know.
we have no idea
Mm.
what's going on here. But nobody, it was just like, do you know what, if we push you in the corner, we'll sweep you under the carpet, it'll go away. But it
Mhm.
wasn't going away, it was getting worse. Yeah.
And we, as the psychiatry team that supported the sick kids at the time, we very much got in around that behaviour. So where they would say to you know, the child's acting, or is that you know, it's really important to understand the behaviours, because it's really scary for the child as well.
Yeah.
They don't know what's happening to their body. A lot of children will talk about feeling possessed, that somebody else has got control of my body and that I'm just there. But you know, and that's really scary. So it's really important then that they have either psychology or a team of mental health professionals in offering that support to explore their feelings and emotions,
Absolutely.
as well. So what happened then?
After we was admitted to John Radcliffe's, I mean,
Mhm.
I've just felt like a 10 ton had been lifted off my shoulders. They did more and more tests on Gracie. Then she was obviously diagnosed with it, and then they just said it's going to be a trial and error, Miss Savin, of what medication to put Gracie on. We can try this, and lo and behold, the first medication they put her on, she was just improving day by day.
That's great.
Yeah.
And which medication was that? I'm sure
She was
everybody's wondering.
she was put on an epileptic medicine called carbazepine, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Carbamazepine.
Yeah, and it worked wonders for Grace. You could see the improvement. She could walk again. Her speech was coming back. Yeah, learning to write again.
Mm.
It was like a wonder drug. Absolutely. I'm
Mm.
not saying it works for everybody, because it doesn't. It's just hit and miss. But for Grace, it worked perfectly. And then put on penicillin, and she's still on penicillin now up until she's
Mm.
21. So, but
And
yeah,
lots of the literature around Sydenham's career will say they make a full recovery in the first 6 months. So I
yeah.
suppose if the treatment's right, do they make that full recovery? Did you find that with your daughter?
Absolutely, yeah. But it's. Yeah, I was
That's
always
lovely.
waiting for a relapse, because you hear, obviously I joined this group
Yes.
because once I knew what she had, obviously you can research it and find out what's going to happen, what's the next, port of call sort of thing. But yeah, she was amazing. But even now, when we're nearly 3 years on, you hear stories, don't you, from other people,
Mhm.
and I'm just like, wow, is she going to have a relapse? Because you wouldn't you wouldn't know Gracie ever had it now.
That's
There are
fantastic.
ongoing things,
Mm.
but it's hard because I don't know whether it's from when she had Sydenham's career. Is this a knock-on effect, or is it
Mm.
just part and parcel of Gracie growing
Of
up?
who she was going to be.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you
So,
question everything, don't you? You
of
start to
course you do.
question everything. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Once your child's
absolutely.
been unwell, you're just a lot more hypervigilant to any symptom.
Yeah,
So she's in
absolutely.
secondary school now?
Yeah, she started in September, year
Yeah.
7. Yeah, yeah. And doing amazing. But yeah, there's a few ongoing things, like with her eyesight really deteriorated with Sidorun's career. It would just be nice to hear from other parents, or people that have gone through it, what other knock-on effects they've had from it, not just the tics and the movements and things like that, but just, is there any other ongoing, because Gracie's eyesight now, she suffers, I mean, she's only 12.
Mm.
She's now, her eyesight deteriorated. She now has to wear glasses, but is that part parcel? My eyesight's not the best, sort of thing.
Mm.
But also she gets migraine flashes. She never had them before.
Mm.
Suffers. I mean, a 12-year-old doesn't say what a migraine is. I don't suffer with migraines. It's not a word that we
Mm.
use in our household. But she's just like, Mum, not a headache. I feel like I've got a migraine. And I
Mm.
just think, is this something, or is it just Grace? Is it just,
Mm.
yeah, a part of Grace now, sort of thing?
And I know our study picked up migraines, but again, we were a study on 12 patients. So,
Yeah,
what you're asking yourself is exactly right. Is this just part of who she is? And actually, technology's got so good around testing our eyes compared to when you were younger. If they just naturally picked up on these concerns with their eyes and they're more treatable now, or is this an underlying thing with the Sydenham's career? And that's ultimately what we're trying to do within our research world, is get clearer understanding of what the lasting effects are, what's the predictability around the relapses, but also how to diagnose, because your experience there in Milton Keynes, it took a long time to get that diagnosis, and you would hope in this day and age that wouldn't be the story. And that was originally what Andrew Samuel had said to Dr. Morton and I was, what can we do so that this is picked up? quicker, that people get the right treatment,
Yeah.
see the right professionals in a timely manner. So we hope some of what Michael Eyre is going to share with you today will touch on some of that, but there's lots of really good work going on behind the scenes with the charity, exploring all of these questions. It's just the only thing with research is it's very, very slow. So we started this work in 2005, and I think we've made amazing headway, but it's very, very slow.
Yeah.
So if you had some golden advice to any other parent, if they were sitting in the original hospital with Gracie, what would your advice be?
Like I've said, when I joined the Sydenham's Career Facebook page, and I just, even now, I'm just like, do you know what? Don't give up hope, and also push, because if I hadn't, who knows, I could still be sitting here with Gracie having the movements. I just had to, become I am quite a strong person anyway, but I really had to dig deep and push for everything for Gracie. It was hard, and it's heartbreaking because you're already going through the worst time of your life, and then I just had to keep my head clear and just go, do you know what, it'll be all right, Nick, but I had to fight. You have to fight because it's so rare, and it's just a shame that you have to go through that, but we got there in the end. And that's what I would say to anybody going through this: please do not give up hope. And you know what, if you're in and out of hospital day in, day out, keep doing it, keep pushing, because you will get the diagnosis in the end. And that's what happened with us.
And I think that's really important. And I think we as professionals, we also go through a journey and we pick up, skills along the way. I, by chance in Glasgow, there was an outbreak of Sydenham's and became very aware of it. But if I'd trained in Newcastle, I may not have had that experience. So it is always about pushing and asking those questions, because there will be people within the professional fields who will have had experience. But you're exactly right in what you're saying. It's the rareness of it. It's the rareness of it that ultimately makes it really challenging sometimes to. And I read a lot on the Facebook page where people get really frustrated with professionals because they don't have all the answers. But I think you're exactly right. It's just about saying, well, actually, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. It's okay to say I'm not happy. And can I have another opinion? Can I see somebody else as well? Any questions for Nikki from the group? Put you on the spot now, Nikki.
That's okay.
Well, Nikki, you also got involved with a family in a different country. Tell us about that.
After Gracie's diagnosis, obviously I did a shout out to encourage parents not to give up, and there is faith and there is hope at the end of the tunnel, sort of thing. And I got talking to a lady in the Philippines, quite poverty stricken, and she just opened her heart to me. I explained all that I'd gone through with Gracie, and her little girl at the time was going through the same. She opened up saying, how much they have to pay. Obviously, we've got the NHS here. So literally after Gracie's recovery, I raised some money and sent it over to there. I'm getting upset now, but because that's
beautiful.
I got all the help that I could for Grace in the end, but seeing this little girl, I just wanted to make her life better. And I did.
And I think I honestly, that is such an important point as well, because there's lots of research out there as well that is very much influenced by whether people have had money to access. I always remember when we did the systematic review and we looked at all the papers that had been wrote on Sydenham's, and there was one study in Brazil, and it was, I think, about 300 families, but they'd all had to pay privately, and it kind of touched my heart to think, well, what about the other 600 families that didn't have the money to pay to access that treatment? And it is a really powerful thing that there's lots of areas across the world, because they'll talk about Sydenham's being a sort of a third world country illness, that where they just don't have the facilities or the funding to access help.
Absolutely. I feel myself, despite the battle that I had to go through with Grace, almost feel so privileged after listening to this family, because they're almost like, they're a family of 5, and it's like, do we feed my children, but also I've got to give my daughter medication. COVID was still happening in the Philippines. They were both out of work, and it's just like, my goodness, I will try and do. I mean, I've got my own little cleaning business, and I just raise money from my clients within Milton Keynes.
That's so nice.
told them the story, and then I raised about £1,000 and sent it straight over to the Philippines. So her medication was then sorted. They had a little bit of a breather to go, actually, we've got food, and also her medication sorted for a little while. Yeah, so
that's just beautiful. What an incredible story. Any other questions for Nikki? No.
I was just going to highlight that thing about having to become an expert in your own child's condition or your own condition, and unfortunately doctors are good at stuff that's common, and they get less good with things that are, you know, not so common and not their area of expertise. And as a charity, we are part of a broader network of rare disease groups, and you hear the same stories all the time, that something somebody develops unusual symptoms, it doesn't fit with what people know, they often end up having to Google, and actually I think Dr. Google is a great friend to those of us who have, you know, weird, strange conditions that no one seems to understand, because it can actually very quickly point you in the right direction. But yeah, part of that is standing up. And you said being the kind of mother you didn't want to be. I think that's unfair. I think that was exactly the kind of mother you had to be, and I think that's really good.
And you didn't allow the hospital to kind of say, no, you're leaving. And I think that's the key, because I think sometimes parents feel very overwhelmed by, you know, they have to do what the professionals say, but actually you hadn't had your questions answered, and you weren't jumping up and down and shouting. You've simply just said, but you've not answered my questions, so I don't feel happy to leave. You know, I don't want to take my daughter home in the same state that I've brought her in. And I think that's a really powerful thing as well, to just say to them, stop, I'm not happy and I need an answer. Because then the nurse did come back and say, look, we don't know. That must have been such a really emotional moment, but very powerful as well. Because then they've signposted you on to Oxford and to the next hospital to get more tests, which is key when you've not got the answers.
Oh, absolutely. And that's all I will say to other parents now. Just don't, just don't give up, and just, you know your own children, and you know when something's wrong. And I knew I had to be heard with this one. You know, she's been in hospital before, sort of thing, but with this one, I just knew I can't keep going home, because I knew there was something more to this, and seeing her deteriorate before my eyes. And I was just like, just keep pushing, Nick, you can do this, keep pushing. Yeah. And I'm so glad now I did, because some parents would just go home and just hope that it'll get better. But I just knew it wasn't. Yeah. And that's when I had to, fight all the way. And then when I got to Oxford, and then I met the infectious disease consultant, and he said, it's almost like Gracie was like a little guinea pig, because he's just like, I've read about this, and he said it's the first time I've ever seen it. So he was so intrigued that he could actually see a little girl going through it without a textbook, sort of thing. He was just fascinated, and spent so much time with Grace, going, you know, seeing how she was developing and how the medication was working. And it was just
on a learning journey together, weren't they? They were on a learning journey together. We were very fortunate in Glasgow. There was a consultant that would go over to Australia and do work with the Aborigines, so he'd seen quite a lot of Sydenham's career, so he was very pro in the beginning when we started to have an outbreak. And one of the paediatricians as well from the diabetes teams was very clued into Sydenham's, and that massively helped. And as you're describing, we watched the neurology department and I suppose the psychiatry department develop together. We just developed together, so that, you know, by the time the 5th or the 6th case was coming in, very quickly we were picking that up. So it's all about experience, and I think sometimes the professionals don't have all the answers, and that's okay. But as a parent, sometimes that doesn't feel okay. It's a tricky position to be in.
It's also, yeah, I just find what we went through, but it's also a learning curve for for doctors and nurses to actually
you're learning all the
see,
time.
to see somebody in person with it, rather than just reading what this is about, but to actually witness it from a little human being, to go, oh, actually, we've actually got this person that's got this condition. Let's go with it. And yeah.
So we've got 2 hands up now. One is Sadiq and one is Adrian. 3 hands